Imagine a pipeline, not made of steel, not buried underground, but just as real. One end begins in the national treasuries of Africa, oil revenues, mining profits, public funds, development loans. The other end vanishes into silence, into marble floors, into private offices, into discreet elevators descending beneath Zurich and Geneva. And every year, an estimated $50 billion flows through that pipeline. Not invested, not taxed, not accounted for, just gone. This is not random corruption. This is not isolated theft. This is a system, a machine, a vacuum that never stops spinning. And for nearly a century, that vacuum has had a preferred destination, Switzerland. Today we are going inside that system. We are opening the Swiss vault. We are examining the law that built it, the leaders who used it, the illusion of frozen assets, and the modern networks that replaced old secrecy. Because this is not just a story about banks, it is a story about partnership. For every suitcase that left Africa, someone had to open the door. File 1, The Law of Silence, the 1934 Fortress. To understand the Swiss vault, you have to go back to 1934. Europe was unstable, capital was nervous. Elites wanted somewhere safe to hide wealth, and Switzerland made a decision, not just to be neutral in war, but to become neutral in money. That year, Switzerland passed the Swiss Banking Act of 1934. On the surface, it was about privacy, but in reality, it was about protection. The law made it a criminal offense for a Swiss banker to reveal the identity of an account holder. Not a civil violation, not a fine, a criminal act. That means a banker could go to prison for telling the truth. Let that sink in. At the same time, the world was moving toward regulation and transparency. Switzerland created the most secure financial secrecy system in modern history. And then came the innovation that changed everything. Numbered accounts. No names, no identity, just a number, a code, an entry in a ledger that only a handful of people could access. You did not exist as a person, you existed as a sequence. And with that, the vault was born. Not just a physical vault, but a legal one. A system where wealth could disappear from one country and reappear in another, with no traceable ownership. This was not an accident, it was a business model. Switzerland was not just offering safety, it was offering invisibility. File 2, The Pipeline, How Money Leaves Africa. Now let's talk about how the money actually moves, because this is where the myth breaks down. People often imagine corruption as a local problem. A leader steals, a country suffers, but the reality is more complex. Money does not disappear on its own. It is moved, structured, cleaned, protected, and that requires a network. Here is the basic pipeline. Extraction phase. Funds are diverted from public resources, oil revenues, mining contracts, infrastructure budgets, foreign aid. Transfer phase. The money is moved through shell companies, offshore accounts, intermediary banks. Integration phase. The funds enter legitimate financial systems, private banks, investment portfolios, real estate, and for decades, Switzerland was the central hub for this process. Not because African leaders were uniquely corrupt, but because Switzerland built the perfect system to receive the money. No questions, no disclosure, no risk, just a vault. File 3, the Swiss Hall of Fame. Now let's open the records, because this system was not theoretical, it was used repeatedly by some of the most powerful leaders in modern African history. Mobutu Sese Seko, Zaire, DRC. Mobutu ruled Zaire for over 3 decades. During that time, he is estimated to have siphoned up to $4 billion from the state. Swiss banks were central to his financial network. When his regime collapsed in 1997, Switzerland announced it had frozen his assets. The world expected billions. But what was officially found? Roughly $6 million. That is not a recovery. That is a disappearance. So where did the rest go? It didn't vanish. It was layered. moved through accounts, transferred across jurisdictions, hidden within the very system designed to protect it. The vault did not fail, it worked perfectly. Sani Abacha, Nigeria. Now consider Nigeria in the 1990s. Under General Sani Abacha, billions were siphoned from the national treasury. Estimates range from $3 billion to $5 billion. A significant portion passed through Swiss banks. After his death, investigations uncovered over $700 million in Switzerland alone. But here's the key point. It took Nigeria decades of legal battles to recover even a portion of that money. Decades, lawyers, negotiations, diplomatic pressure. And even then, full recovery never happened. Because once money enters the Swiss system, it becomes incredibly difficult to trace. Hosni Mubarak, Egypt. After the 2011 uprising in Egypt, Switzerland moved quickly. It froze approximately $430 million linked to Mubarak's circle. The headlines framed this as a victory. But what happened next? Years of legal disputes, delayed proceedings, complicated requirements for proof, and much of that money remained frozen, not returned, because freezing is not the same as giving back. The Dos Santos Network, Angola. More recently, investigations like the Luanda leaks exposed how Angola's elite moved hundreds of millions through complex international networks. Swiss financial institutions appeared again, not always as the final destination, but as a filter, a point where money becomes clean enough to enter global markets. The vault is no longer just a place, it is a process. File 4. The frozen asset illusion. Now we arrive at the part most people misunderstand. When you hear that Switzerland has frozen assets, it sounds like justice. It sounds like accountability. But in reality, it is often something else entirely. Because when assets are frozen, they remain in Swiss banks. They are still managed by Swiss institutions. They generate fees for Swiss financial systems. The money is removed from Africa. But it does not return. Instead, it enters a legal limbo. And here is the critical mechanism, the burden of proof. Switzerland often requires African governments to prove that the money was stolen, how it was stolen, where it came from. This sounds reasonable until you consider the reality. The leaders who stole the money often destroyed records. They controlled the institutions. They erased the paper trail. So now, the country that was robbed must reconstruct evidence of a crime inside a system designed to hide it. This is what we call the frozen asset trap. The money is gone but not returned. And while it sits in Switzerland, African economies remain deprived of capital. File 5. The business of neutrality. Switzerland often presents itself as neutral, politically neutral, economically stable, financially reliable. But neutrality is not passive. It is structured, designed, maintained. And in the case of Swiss banking, neutrality became a business model. Because think about the incentives. If you are a global elite with questionable funds, where do you go? To a country that protects anonymity, criminalizes disclosure, offers legal shielding, provides financial expertise. Neutrality becomes a service, and secrecy becomes a product. This is why the Swiss vault became so central to global wealth flows, not just African wealth, but global wealth. Africa, however, became one of its most consistent sources. File 6. The new secrecy, digital vaults. Now, Switzerland claims the era of secrecy is over, and to some extent, formal banking secrecy laws have been weakened. Information sharing agreements exist. Transparency has increased. But here is the reality. The system did not disappear. It evolved. Today, secrecy operates through wealth managers, fiduciary accounts, offshore structures, shell corporations. Money no longer needs to sit in a single Swiss vault. It moves. Through Dubai, Mauritius, Luxembourg, Cayman Islands, Swiss institutions still play a role, But now, as part of a global network, the vault is no longer a room. It is a system, a web, a financial architecture designed to obscure ownership. File 7, The Real Cost, Africa's Development Gap. Now let's bring this back to the ground, because this is not just about numbers, it is about consequences. $50 billion per year. What does that mean? It means schools not built, hospitals underfunded, infrastructure delayed, industries undeveloped. It means governments relying on loans. While their own wealth sits abroad, it means dependency. Not because Africa lacks resources, but because those resources are constantly extracted. And here is the hardest truth. This is not just external. It is a partnership. African leaders, Western banks, global financial systems, all connected. Final thoughts. The door and the key. The Swiss vault is not just a building. It is not just a country. It is a symbol of a system where wealth can disappear, ownership can be hidden, accountability can be delayed. But most importantly, it is a symbol of cooperation, because for every leader who moved money, there was a banker who received it. For every transaction, there was an institution that processed it. For every hidden account, there was a system that protected it. And until that system changes, the vacuum will keep spinning. Because the real question is not, why is money leaving Africa? The real question is, why is there always somewhere willing to receive it? If you made it this far, subscribe, because this is not just history, this is structure. And I want to hear from you. Is Swiss neutrality protection or participation? Stay curious, stay sovereign, and I'll see you in the next one.